Japanese peasants didn't just owe one lord. Page 40 in your notebooks. Whereas a European peasant, for example, would only owe the lord on whose estate they lived. If you were a Japanese peasant, it was possible, due to the way things were arranged, that you might have more than one lord. You don't need to worry about the mechanics of how that happened. You just need to know that that could happen, and the important result of having multiple lords. You might end up paying between 50 to 60% of whatever you produced in taxes to your lords. Now, to put that in perspective, remember that a Hawaiian peasant had to pay 2/3 of everything. So it's not necessarily incredibly high, but still a big chunk, perhaps even if not half, even the majority of what you produced. And in exchange for that, you get one key thing from your lord: security from threats. Your lord provides for the samurai out of your taxes, and the samurai protect the lord, and the samurai protect you. You did, this was not provided by your lords, but provided by the system, you had some legal protections. There's the Manshujo, which is a board of inquiry. And then there's the High Court. And every time I say the Japanese name for it, at least some students will imagine that I have sneezed. It is the Hikitsukeshu. Yeah, it does sound like there's just no way around it. Now, this may seem strange that we've got courts in a feudal system, since feudal systems really sounded like they were just based on personal relationships. But you need to understand that Japan is a special case because of how long they had a feudal system. The feudal system in Japan does not really come to an end until the late 19th century. You get something called the Meiji Restoration. You get modernization of Japan, especially beginning in the 1870s. So they have a lot longer to add things on to their feudal system. And that's why we get these boards of inquiry and courts. Now, these were important to you as a peasant because they gave you a place to dispute your lord, which is certainly not something that European peasants really had. Hawaiian peasants couldn't really dispute things with their lord. They could leave. But Japanese peasants had a way of maybe getting their taxes reduced to a fair and appropriate level without having to leave home. Another thing to understand, this kind of touches on some of what we considered with Hawaiian peasants. Remember, Hawaiian peasants were segregated at different times and were not allowed to eat with men or the same food as men. In Japan, we need to also think about women's rights. And one of the things we need to know is that as time went on, women had fewer rights and were treated less equally than they were earlier in the Japanese feudal system. Also, one of our themes has been regulation of relations between men and women. Here, the relationships were not as strict as they were in Europe. Remember, a lot of what we're talking about is relationships between couples. And so they're not as strict as in Europe, in the sense that couples often had sexual relations before marriage. They were not as loose as they were in Hawaii, though. Remember, in Hawaii, outside of marriage, before marriage, was not really thought of as something that should be regulated. And that's saying something, since Hawaii's kapu had so many rules about so many things. Japan is that middle ground, and they kind of even had this institutionalized. It's called the yohai, or night visit. And it's with so many things in Japan, it can happen, but you need to be polite and discreet and at least pretend like it's not happening. Right? So everybody knows it's going on, but as long as you're sneaky and nobody talks about it, it's okay. Right. And I just bring this up as an example so you can understand how different things are regulated, how rules are approached. So remember, this same kind of stuff in Europe would get you likely tortured, executed, or both. Now that does conclude our notes about the Japanese peasants. That screen. Okay. All right, that leaves us for part 2 of what we're doing today. And for that, you need to actually flip back to page 39 in your notebooks. Everybody's got a 39. Your 39's right there, Dion. What do you mean you don't have it? Nobody has 39 yet. We're working on it right now. Okay. Page 39 in your notebooks. Let's see, where did my notebook go? Okay. Go. Okay. You have already done the reflection questions 1 and 2 in your notebooks. That was just our list of kind of healthy, unhealthy foods and such. Today, you're going to use the assignments from earlier this week, our 2 food desert assignments, and your notes to answer a couple of questions. So, reflection question number 3, in the United States, who is more likely to have a disease caused by poor diet, high income or low income people? You guys just kind of intuitively, instinctually knew the answer to this. What we didn't have at that time was the reason why. So I kind of want you to revisit that question and provide an answer and provide the explanation, right, for why the group that you chose is likely to have a disease caused by poor diet. I'm not going to give away the answer. My guess is you all have it by now, but I want to make sure we're thinking and processing. And then reflection question 4. What is the most important way the diets of past Japanese peasants and today's low-income Americans are different? Don't panic about that question. You don't actually know that much about the Japanese peasants' diet, so there's not much that you have to think about there. You do know a lot about American diets at this point. Find that one key difference between what the Japanese peasants were eating and what low-income families in America today are eating. For both of these, it says discuss the questions with your group. That means the people that you worked with at your assigned group of desks. Answer the questions. You guys have a lot of time to work on this. 30 minutes to answer those 2 questions. And then we will have our exit slip in the last 4 minutes of class. Please work with your groups, right? Talk it through, answer the questions. Does anyone have questions for me? All right, I like that affirmative. Okay, get to it.